Hello, this is Evan Williams, and I'm doing the presentation of our project for Team 3 for our senior capstone. A quick overview of our project: we decided to go with a web application, with the main focus being a patient database that can be used to verify eligibility for vaccines or any other number of applications. The primary function, however, is to have a database of patient profiles with key information such as the patient's name, age, and whether or not they have any prior health conditions. A few of the main requirements that we identified for this project were to be able to view a list of patient profiles, to create new patient profiles, to edit existing patient profiles, as well as to delete patient profiles that are in the database. And so we achieved this using Visual Studio with ASP.NET Core web applications and Microsoft SQL Server. So a quick demonstration of how the database functions. So here, as you can see, this is the landing page for our web application. It's a pretty simple home page here that just has our welcome page, but then you can click on patients, which brings you to a list of all of the patients. And as you can see here, it displays their last name, their middle name or initial in this case, their first name, their age, and if the information is provided, then their phone number. For this patient, we have a Doe F, John, age 21. To demonstrate adding a new patient profile, we can click on this button here, which will bring us to the patient profile creation page. A couple things. Some of these fields are required. The only required fields to create a new patient profile are the first name, the last name, and the age. So you'll see if I hit create without filling them in, we get an error for each of these. So if I go back, I'll put in my my own information just as an example. And let's say, for the sake of demonstration, that I do have a prior health condition, such as like asthma or whatever. We left this vague intentionally so that it could apply to any number of use cases. So, like, say the vaccine weren't specifically for COVID-19, say it were for something else. You could just click this to indicate that their prior health conditions are relevant to the disease that the vaccine is for. In this case, if we are talking about COVID-19, then checking this would indicate that you have some sort of comorbidity, such as diabetes, asthma, etc., etc. And phone number isn't required, but let's see. Just for demonstration purposes, and we hit create, which redirects us here, and we can also see that there's now a new patient profile on the list of patients, and that's going to have my my last name, my middle initial, first name, my age, and then also my phone number, right? So as you can see, there is also delete and edit buttons. So I click edit, which brings me to a different page, right, which allows me to edit a patient's profile. So here you can change any of the fields that you filled in when you first created the profile. So let's say I accidentally said that I had a prior health condition. and I want to uncheck that, or for something that displays on the previous page. Let's say I entered in the phone number wrong. Let's say it's actually supposed to be 121 instead of 123. So we can hit update, and as we can see, that changed here in the database. It is now 121 1234 instead of 123. While this may not be the most common thing, in some cases you may want to delete a patient profile. In that case, this can be clicked. It prompts you asking if you're sure you would like to delete a patient profile. You hit OK, and now the patient profile is removed from the database as well as the patient list here. So as of right now, that is the extent of the functionality of our web application. So now I'm going to pull up Visual Studio here, and I'm going to go through some of the files that allow us to do these things. So if we go here, this is index.cshtml, and this is the essentially the HTML page. It doesn't have any of the C# code. That would be here. But this is where the form for both displaying and the form for displaying the patient list is located in this index.cshtml file. So here you can see table, striped border, and here you can see the various labels we use for the headings, right? And that's going to be patients.first_or_default.patient_elm_name. And that's why if we go back here, it displays as that, because we're using this ASP4 tag, helper tag, which allows us to forego writing individual custom helper tags for each label, and it autofills the heading. It autofills the label for us. So here, since we need it to display the actual patient information for each patient profile, we couldn't use that. We had to use custom HTML helper tags to display specific patient information. And that's where you see the point to item.patient, elname, mname, fname, age, and phone. And so those are custom helper tags that point to specifically the patient profile that we are looking at as we iterate through each item in the patients table, which is what this code is for. For each item in model.patients, and all of that is pointing towards the patients entity table. So for each item in the patients table, we're going to display the last name, middle name, first name, age, and phone number, as well as display a delete button and an edit button for each. And so that's how this works. And this right here, this else tag, or this else statement, if the database were to be empty, then it would display a paragraph saying no patient information is available. And if I go back to the website, to the web app, and I delete this last bit of patient information, it asks me if I'm sure. I hit OK, and as you can see here, no patient information available. So and then for this, you have the asynchronous task, which is how we cause the delete button to function, and that that links to the specific patient ID that we are choosing to delete the profile for. If the patient doesn't exist, then we return that the patient doesn't exist, and otherwise, and right, so like we return that breaks out of this, so it doesn't delete anything or save anything. But otherwise, it removes the patient profile, saves the changes, and then returns to the home page, to the patient list. For the create page, we have much the same thing. This is just going to be a form with the method post, which is what allows us to push the changes to the database. And we have we have a class that allows for the errors, which is how we send out an error message if you try to submit the form while required fields are empty. And then for each field, we just have a label and an input. And again, using these ASP helper tags, which allow us to autofill the labels and auto-assign the form fields, the text box fields, to specific fields in the database, in the patient's database. And then on the create, the CS, again, we have an asynchronous task, which allows us to on post, which when we hit the submit button, it posts. It checks if the form is valid, and if it is, then it adds the patient to the patient's table. It saves the changes and it returns to the index. Otherwise, it essentially it spits out the error messages saying that the model is invalid and that there are required fields that still need to be filled out. The edit page is going to be basically exactly the same, but it is going to have a different value in this input type, which is submit. It's going to have the value update, and essentially what that is going to change is when we go here, if the model state is valid, right? Again, it checks if it's valid if all the fields are empty. So if say for instance you try to edit the patient profile and you try to remove their first name, their last name, or their age, which are all required fields. If you try to remove any of them, then it would no longer be valid, and you would click update and it would give you an error. So it would create a new variable, patient from database, which is whichever patient we're finding, right? And for that patient, it assigns it to whatever patient ID you've selected. And then it rebinds all of these. So if that happens, right? If it's valid, it creates a new patient, essentially, and waits for you to find the patient with the correct ID, which we find based on here we have a hidden input type with a ASP helper tag that points at the patient's ID for each patient listed on the page, or for the patient that you're using. And then when you change everything, it reassigns the value in the database to whatever the value on the page is, and then it saves those changes asynchronously, and then it returns you to the patient list page. And that is essentially how all of this works. Most of these are just setting up the or this page just sets up the patient vaccine model public class patients. This essentially just sets up the database. If the let's see, go to app settings. Where was it? yeah, here. So here in the add patient to database.cs, it essentially it checks for the table patients, the or the patient's database, right? And if it doesn't exist, it creates a new database and creates the table patients, and it populates, or it doesn't populate, but it creates the columns with the required fields: ID, first name, last name, and age. ID being the unique identifier, which is the primary key of the table. And so this is essentially the code that makes it so that, like, even if you were to run this on a computer where you did not have the specific database created, it would create it for you, as long as you were pointed at the correct server, which is here in the app settings.json. You go here and you have the connection strings, default connection, and then here server equals. Here is where you would put the name of whatever server you're using. And if I open Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, you can see that the name of the database here, and again, patient vaccine DB, dbo.patients, right? You can see the server name there is equal to, or is the same as the server name here. So this has to be changed based on whatever machine you're running it on and whatever server you are pointing at. But as long as that is pointed at a valid server, then when you run the program and you whenever you try to run it, it will create the database in the server that you have, that you're pointed at in the app settings. So as of right now, this is our project. As you can see, it functions as a database that can be viewed, added to, edited, and profiles can be deleted as well. And so as a prototype of a patient profile database, it's completely functional. So thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, please let us know. Thanks.